has created what I like to call our Get Rich Slow program at Barr. I like to tell folks that, if you work at Barr for 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to get rich slow. And it's really special to see that change in.
Welcome to the Talk Chamber, a production of the Greater Memphis Chamber. The Talk Chamber is the podcast for the latest on the Chamber, economic development, and all things Memphis. Today's episode features Scott Beal and Joe Lyons with Barr Brands. Thank you guys so much for coming on here.
It's a delight to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Just to kick us off, could you give us, what is the start of Barr Brands? How did that get to where it is?
Well, yeah, we love telling this story, and we tell it often. It started out back in 1946. There was a fire in the shipyard in New York, and it darn near burned the ship to the waterline. And they traced the cause of the fire back to a flammable paint remover, to which William Barr, our founder, brought to market the first non-flammable paint remover. And from that point forward, for the next 50 years, we were a paint adjacency chemical company, right? And up until 1996, when we formed an ESOP.
Okay. That's awesome. And I do want to talk about the ESOPs in a few minutes. But now I think y'all have expanded into a lot of other products and a lot of other things. The name Barr Brands might not be that might not instantly click and everybody knows this is exactly what you do. But your products are household names. Everybody knows them. Could one of y'all tell us a little bit about what the products you sell are?
Yeah, so for about the first 60 years of the company, we really sold paint remover and paint thinners and other solvents like acetone. In the early 2000s, 2003, we made our first acquisition, outside of our legacy businesses when we bought Damprid. Damprid was a small company located in Orlando, Florida at the time. We ended up relocating the operations and several of the employees from Orlando to Memphis. And that was a big change for us and a big strategic change, trying to get out of some of our legacy products into more kind of cleaning products and household products. And we've followed that up with acquisitions of a number of other well-known brands like Goof Off, Home Armor, Mold Armor, and eventually Microban. And so the name Barr Brands is very intentional. We see ourselves as a house of brands. We have aspirations to make our current brands famous and to acquire other brands and bring them in-house here to Memphis.
That's awesome. And I was telling Joe this before we got started. The other day, I was simply Googling what's the best solution for moisture in my bathroom at my house. And the very first thing to pop up, Google's first suggestion was Damprid.
There you go.
And I was telling him, I do like to research and I like to find the best solutions. But they told me right there the best solution was Damprid. And I was like, first of all, Memphis-Made. As a Memphis person, I love that. But second of all, I know you guys, I know this brand, and it already has done so well for so long, for 80 years now, as a company y'all have. So that was my solution right there.
Well, if Google says it must be true.
Of course, exactly.
We're proud of the Damprid brand because it's something on the order of 10 times bigger than it was when we bought it. And so we figured out a little bit of the secret sauce about how to grow these brands.
That's awesome. That's incredible. And as I mentioned, 80 years is what you guys are celebrating, and that's such a large achievement. A lot of companies don't make it that far. And so when we see companies that do, it's really special, especially with y'all's story behind the company. What do you think makes Barr Brands unique?
What makes us unique? Well, we are perhaps the largest consumer packaged goods company in this area, in the Mid-South area. But other than our size, it's this employee ownership model that's pretty special. We're 100% employee owned, so that's a little different than other ESOPs out there. And I know we'll talk more about the ESOP, but this is really part of our DNA, right? And we make decisions with this in mind, with really trying to consider how do we create retirement wealth for our employee owners. And it's also a key differentiator in how we recruit top talent to come join our team, right? We want people who are going to be part of a mission-driven company. And that's truly what we're building here.
That's awesome. I love that. And it really shows. When I had the privilege of attending y'all's 80th anniversary celebration and seeing the enthusiasm from the employees at Barr Brands, especially when it came to the ESOP, was exciting because that's something that you can tell that they cared about not only the company, but about the environment and the culture that has been built around Barr Brands.
Thank you. Well, and by the way, thank you to the Chamber for coming and supporting us at that shareholder meeting and celebrating our 80th year. That's just another way that the Chamber supports its membership.
Of course, we are happy to be there and happy to celebrate thriving businesses in Memphis. Like I said, 80 years is a big accomplishment. And I've said it on the podcast before, 1 year is an accomplishment. So we love to celebrate our businesses, big and small, medium-sized too, just because it just shows that Memphis
has something to offer.
Yes.
Right?
And
we got something going on.
Growing, and there is room for growth for all businesses.
You're here.
So 80 years. What do you think has made Barr Brands last that long? What is giving y'all that ability?
Yeah, like I said before, for the first 50, 60 years of the company, we really sold commodity, solvents and paint removers and, commodity chemistry in a metal can, right? And so there's not a lot of differentiation there. It's not a growth business. And as you can imagine, it's not too hard to put paint thinner in a can and sell it. So we do have some competitors out there. This change in strategy, has really helped us grow. And that's really, the last 20 years where we've created, value for our employee owners as we've diversified into products and product categories that have higher growth rates, higher margins and more innovation potential and stronger brands, right? And so that's really helped us grow and diversify our portfolio to help us absorb any kind of market disruptions and shocks and things like that.
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to expound on that. A lot has changed since the 1940s, both just in our world and as a company. How has Barr Brands been able to keep up with that, keep up with the changing times, the new technology, all that stuff?
You're right. And I think the pace of change has accelerated dramatically over the last couple decades.
Definitely.
Joe and I think would both say that the company's virtually unrecognizable to what it was back in the early 2000s. Our employee ownership model has changed us a lot. The transformation of our portfolio as we've done M&A and really built this house of brands. And the sophisticated team that we've been able to build, we're really quite proud of. But what's also important, I think, maybe a little bit different than the question you asked, is what hasn't changed. And we're still focused on the consumer as we've always been. Back to the days of solving the problem of a flammable paint remover. We're still very entrepreneurial in how we build the business, and we're still right here in Memphis, right? Still based here, and I think those roots matter.
100%. Thanks for bringing that up, because there's always something to be said about, sticking to your roots and knowing where you came from, but also at the same time being able to keep up with the world as it changes, but holding true to who you are.
Yeah, we agree with that.
What you are doing. To pivot just a bit, something, as we've mentioned, that I really find interesting about Barr Brands is the ESOP. Could you explain what that is and why it's necessary for the company?
Yeah, so essentially an ESOP is a retirement plan. And so, there are some companies like us that are 100% employee-owned ESOPs where the ESOP trust owns all of the shares on behalf of the employees. There are some that are partial ESOPs, and so maybe the ESOP owns only 30% of the shares. We happen to be 100% employee-owned. And like Scott said, that's part of our DNA. In fact, when we acquired Microban about 15 years ago, actually, it was really important to us that everyone participated in the ESOP. And so all of the employees at Microban in the U.S. immediately became eligible to participate in our ESOP when we made that acquisition. But they had about 50 employees all across the world. We had people in Europe and Asia and South America. And so it was really important for us to make sure that those employees also had the same benefit that the U.S. employees did. And an ESOP is a U.S. ERISA and IRS governed retirement plan. So you can't, if you're not a U.S. citizen, you're not working in the U.S., you can't participate. And so we created a phantom stock plan for those outside the U.S. so that everyone shared in that same benefit. We didn't want to have haves and have-nots. But essentially, the ESOP trust owns all the shares, and each employee's account gets credited with additional shares. Every year you work at the company, you earn additional shares. So that's what an ESOP is. Well, like Scott said, we became an ESOP in 1996. Neither of us were at the company at that point. We were both in our senior year in college at that point. But we had a long-term board member who retired from our board about 5 years ago, named Ted Bailey, longtime Memphian, and he was on the board of Barr before we became an ESOP. And was a trusted advisor to the Taylor family that owned the company back then. And in many cases, you can, if you want to sell your company and you want top dollar for you want to get every penny out of it that you can, you're not going to form an ESOP and sell the company to the ESOP. You're going to sell to a private equity firm or a strategic competitor that's willing to pay a whole lot more. So a lot of times it takes an altruistic owner or shareholder group that really cares about the legacy that they want to leave and cares about the employees that help them build their wealth. And so that was the case here. And the Taylor family really wanted to do something good for the employees at Barr and give back to those employees, and that willingness to do that has changed countless lives, and that legacy is stronger than ever. And we've recently, in the last couple of years, worked with an ESOP consulting firm to put plans in place to make sure that this ESOP keeps going for at least the next 100 years. So
that's incredible. Do you have any stories or anecdotes or something that you could tell about how this has benefited or impacted employees' lives?
Yeah, so we've been an ESOP for 30 years now, and over that 30 years, we've had right around 100 employees reach the $1 million mark in retirement savings in the ESOP. That's pretty special. Over the last 5 or 10 years, our employees have received, on average, about 25% of their pay in company stock in the ESOP every year. We've also been really successful growing the company, and that results in higher stock price each year when we grow. And our compound annual growth rate in our stock price has been over 15% over the last 20 years, which beats the S&P 500, the Dow, the NASDAQ over that same period. So that combination of earning additional shares every year and the compounding effect of increasing share price has created what I like to call our Get Rich Slow program at Barr. And I like to tell our folks, especially all the folks that work really hard. We have a couple hundred people down on President's Island in 2 plants and a distribution center down there. I like to tell folks that if you work at Barr for 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to get rich slow. And it's really special to see that change in people's lives and the wealth that can create in retirement. And each year in March, we just had our shareholders meeting that Scott mentioned earlier, where we unveil our new share price and we talk about other things going on in the company. And over the last several years, the last 3 or 4 years, we've started having employees share testimonials or have panel discussions where employees can talk about how the ESOP has impacted their lives. And there's been a couple of really powerful, emotional stories shared. For example, one employee a few years ago shared with everybody that the ESOP meant to her that her daughter would be the first person in her family to grow up above the poverty line.
Oh,
right?
that's so special.
That's powerful. We had another employee shared that it meant that he would never have to live under a bridge. right? Like that's pretty powerful statement. And then 2 years ago, one of our supervisors who has been with the company for a handful of years, she was on our panel, and she said that the aha moment about, how incredible the ESOP was after her second year. She got her second annual ESOP statement, and she looked at it and kind of did a double take, and she said, there's more money in this ESOP after just 2 years than there was in the 401k plan that she had at the job she had just spent 15 years at before she came to Barr. So
Wow.
those are some pretty cool testimonials.
Very powerful. Really shows the impact that an ESOP can have on the people that are working and making up this company and, are the life of the company. And it really is a testament to company culture as well, I feel like, because, it motivates employees. It gives them something to look forward to, is that annual shareholders meeting, seeing that annual statement. But just from the day to day, it's knowing that your company cares about you and cares about your well-being in the long run, not just did you make it to work today.
Yeah. Well, and it is, the ESOP is part of our secret sauce for sure. I would say beyond that, though, it's an exciting time at Barr, right? So even beyond the employee ownership aspect of it, we're growing. And it's exciting to be part of growth, right? It means we're winning in the marketplace. We're adding to the team and building capability. Things like e-commerce, AI, advertising, innovation are all things we're building on. We're modernizing our factories. We're getting great results from those investments. We're launching new to the world products and brands even. And it's just fun to come to work and work on those kinds of problems every day. And it just goes back to the can-do spirit that is created by that employee ownership aspect.
And I'm just thinking back to y'all's celebration, all the cheers and all the excitement from the employees who were sitting in that stakeholders meeting.
Because they know they're creating the result themselves, right? And so it's not that we don't have to work at this, and it's not that we don't have challenges, but that they're exciting challenges, and then the rewards are there.
If you do something great at Barr, you've made yourself and all the other employees that work at Barr, wealthier, and there's no one else outside of the company that shares in that. So
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Let's keep talking about the employees and the people that make up the workforce at Barr Brands. I was able to tour the facilities back in January or late January, early February. And just from that tour, there were so many people that I got to meet and say hello to. And I can see that it takes a lot of people and a lot of moving parts, both in terms of machines and people. But could you talk about who makes up this workforce? What kind of jobs do y'all have?
Yeah, so we've got an hourly workforce that works hard in the factories and distribution center that Joe described. We got a salaried workforce at our headquarters over on Poplar, and it's what we found is a very strong work culture here in Memphis to help us, achieve the world-class operating status that we have. And in some cases, we've been able to recruit top talent to come to Memphis, to come join the mission that we're on, to help maybe with some of those skills that we didn't have innately here in town. But the fact that people want to come here and join what we're doing has allowed us to assemble a pretty special team.
It excites me when I hear companies talk about people wanting to come to Memphis and work for them.
Yeah.
Because it not only shows that that company is doing great things, but it's that our city is special and has something special.
I mean, we have a lot to offer, right? I mean, as a city, the climate ain't too shabby. The cost of living is great. Some of the fun things culturally that are going on is has a lot to offer, and some great communities. And so we celebrate it, right? And we really point to it as a selling factor when we're trying to show people what they can be part of.
And we've been really successful over the last 5-6 years in recruiting really talented people from big companies, big roles at big companies like Procter & Gamble, Disney, Pepsi, Owens Corning, Unilever, Hershey, come join our team here and relocate to Memphis. So I think that says a lot about, Barr brands and about Memphis.
Yeah, definitely. The work you guys do, the brands you guys have, but then again, our city and what we have to offer to people
all those
outside
things.
of work. And what makes Barr such a great place to work?
Well, I think might be a broken record, but that employee ownership model is great. The growth factor and what we're sort of aspiring to, and really achieving. We've been recognized by the Commercial Appeal as a top place to work, and under another as a great place to work, and that is our own employees sort of answering the surveys and the question and saying, and then those results sort of ranking in the top portion of their database, and so we're really proud of that, right? And it's like momentum begets momentum, and we got it right now, and so we're trying to hang on to it.
Yeah.
The other cool thing, and I tell this to people, if we're recruiting somebody from a really big company, say a Procter & Gamble, right? Those huge companies, there's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape. We're big enough that we can do some really cool stuff, right? We can launch some really innovative new products. We have really cool, advertising that airs on TV. You can see our products out when you go to Walmart or Home Depot or Lowe's, et cetera. But we're small enough to where we can kind of, dispatch with all of that bureaucracy and red tape, and we can just get a small group of people together in a room and make a decision and go execute. And that's a lot more fun than, all that red tape, I think.
And I would say it provides that momentum, allows you to keep with that momentum, having a few less obstacles to get through, a few less people to have to okay something before you get going on it.
You're absolutely right.
So to pivot a little bit, kind of talk about y'all's relationship with the Chamber. What is Barr Brand's history with the Chamber?
Yeah, so we joined the Chairman's Circle in 2015 in the early years of the Chairman's Circle. And I think, the initial goal, I believe, was to get 100 companies to sign up and become Chairman's Circle members. I think we were in that first 100. Phil Trineri was leading the Chamber at the time. He was a great friend and mentor of mine. And he actually played a huge role in me landing the job I have here at Barr Brands. So I'm very grateful to Phil for that. But Phil, came out to our offices along with Shay Flynn, who was leading the Chairman's Circle efforts at the time. They brought Spence Wilson Jr. and Scott Brockman from the airport to try to convince us to invest and become a Chairman's Circle member. And at first, we were a little bit apprehensive about making that investment. And so, 11 years ago, our company was half the size it is today. And so that was a big check to write for us. And we were unsure about, kind of making that investment. But we believed in the Chairman's Circle's moon missions at the time, and we recognized there was an inherent conflict of interest to have the Chamber's budget funded by the City Council, and we've got a vested interest in Memphis and the success of the city. And as we continue to grow, we need to be able to recruit and retain top talent in Memphis, and so. That's what convinced us to invest as a Chairman's Circle member.
Thank you for your investment for all these years. I know that's one of our things that we are very proud of is being privately funded by our local business community. And so, but that could not have happened without our Chairman's Circle and without those first 100 signing on and believing in us and what we do and the work that we do to make Memphis greater. So thank you guys for your continued investment. To keep on this same thread, how has the Chamber helped Barr Brand succeed and grow as a business?
Yeah, so I'm prepared for this question because a couple weeks ago, Nancy Coffey asked me to join a call with her to try to recruit another business to join the Chairman's Circle. So I had to kind of think this through a couple weeks ago as well and answer this live. So, but one of the first things that we did when we joined the Chairman's Circle is the team here assembled kind of the one-stop shop team that how you call it, and helped us identify a number of state and local incentive programs. So one of the outcomes of that, we applied for and received a pilot from Edge that helped make possible the investment that we made in our Damprud facility a few years ago to significantly increase our capacity and capabilities, and to reshore a lot of volume that we had outsourced to suppliers in China. So without that pilot program, there'd be fewer jobs here on President's Island at Barr, and we'd be importing more than we do from China. Some other incentives, they helped us apply for and receive some MLGW and TVA incentives for things like LED lighting, new electrical substations to power new equipment that we were investing in our factories to increase capability and efficiency, and then some other training credits and things for our employees. So that was, that all came out of that one-stop shop meeting. And then we continue to get help from the chamber in a number of different ways. So been talking a lot with Bobby White on helping us with advocacy to pursue some infrastructure improvements on President's Island. Those roads really need to be repaved down there. But we also are talking about, there's a number of manufacturers, including ourselves, probably about 12 or 15 companies on President's Island that utilize, McKellar Lake to get barge deliveries of chemicals and other products to their factories. And there are several months, at least 3 or 4 months every year, the last several years, where the Mississippi River levels have been too low to do that. And that costs us, can cost us a couple $1 million extra a year. And so it has a huge impact on the manufacturers there. And so we're interested in trying to get some state, federal help to have a project to permanently widen and deepen that channel there. And so talking with Bobby about those type of projects. We also have engaged with the chamber on professional development for a number of our team members. So we have several high potential younger employees in the chamber's Young Professionals Council. We also have some of our leadership team at our plants down on President's Island in manufacturing, participating in the Manufacturing Council with the chamber. And so, just good networking and professional development opportunities for our folks. Jeanette Jones has been, working with Randy Irving on our HR team. And during Manufacturing Month, we hosted a group from the Goodwill Excel Center, on a tour of our facilities. I think that resulted in us hiring 2 or 3 of those folks that came through on that tour. So, finding some good employees and being able to provide them with some opportunity. And finally, what we're doing here today and the help that you guys gave us at our shareholder meeting, for years, I think Barr has been kind of the best kept secret in Memphis. We've kind of flown under the radar. And as we continue to grow and as we need to continue to add top talent to our team, we need to change that. We need to be seen as an employer of choice here in Memphis. And so we need to get the word out about how great, Barr Brands is. And so, doing this podcast today is helping us do that. Ted Townsend spoke at our, 2026 shareholder meeting a couple weeks ago to help us celebrate our 80th anniversary in business and our 30th year anniversary as an ESOP. And then we've also been talking with Amy Daniels about utilizing the annual Chairman's Luncheon in December to help us really celebrate these 2 important milestones. And we've actually, kind of organized our December board meetings around that event so that our whole board can participate in the Chairman's Luncheon and celebrate with us. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, it's our role is to be the voice of business and be able to partner with our local businesses because, we like to say we're conveners, we're connectors, and we are able to help our businesses grow. And so we're that central place, that one-stop shop for businesses. And so I really love to know how long businesses have been part of the chamber and what that connection is, because I think it's just a testament to the power of partnership and collaboration. We are almost out of time, but I do have 2 last questions for y'all. The first one is, what's the future of Barr Brands? What's next? You've talked a lot about growth. Can you share anything about that?
Well, sure. We want to continue. We have a growth plan, 2030 growth plan, requires us to organically grow the businesses that we already own. We do want to continue to make acquisitions. We do want to, and really for us, it's all about creating that shareholder wealth as the outcome. But the world's changing, right? The rise of e-commerce, it's a real thing. The AI, we're needing to adapt with that. And we're going to make the investments necessary to make that happen. We've outgrown our distribution center, and so we are going to be on the hunt for the next big distribution center here in town. Turns out this is a great place to locate a distribution center.
Who would have thought?
And so we're humble, but we're hungry.
Good. That's what we like to hear. So my final question is, why does Barr Brands choose Memphis? And then for both of you, why do you choose Memphis?
Yeah, well, Memphis has been a great home for the company and for myself. For the company, it's geographically advantageous, right? Joe mentioned being located on the Mississippi River with our factory. We're able to get barge load quantities of chemistry to our tank farm, and that's a scale advantage that our competitors don't have. Being in the middle of the country helps us get rail trucks to our facility and outbound to our customers in an efficient amount of time. We service all the country's largest retailers, and so they require us to get there quickly. We have a great workforce, and then when you think about recruiting, I mentioned all the things that allow us to bring people here, the advantages that we have, and we sell those advantages. We have had opportunities to relocate the company over the years since Joe and I have been here, but we've chosen to stay. We've chosen to stay and put down roots. We do want to raise our profile in the community and be an employer of choice, and we're seeking to invest back in this place. And then personally, I raised my kids here, right? And it was a great place to raise them. I've recently moved downtown and love the downtown culture with the restaurants and all of the opportunities to sort of get out and be part of the community. And so, I'm digging it.
Joe?
Yeah, so I moved to Memphis in 1997. Right after I got my master's degree, went to work for Coopers and Lybrand here, over the years, there were 3 or 4 times when my wife and I thought we were going to move somewhere else. Didn't end up happening for one reason or another. And kind of like Scott said, when you've got kids in school, right? Once they reach a certain age, you kind of really don't want to move. And so, after 29 years, I've kind of put down some deep roots here, and it's a great place to live. My wife and I are kind of empty nesters now. So our son is back in Memphis after graduating from college, and he's working. So he's our roommate right now. But we're having a lot of fun. We have tickets to the Grizzlies games, and we have season tickets to the Broadway shows at the Orpheum. So we're downtown a lot. We don't live downtown like Scott does, but we're really enjoying kind of this phase of our lives and all that Memphis has to offer.
Scott, Joe, thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure having you, a pleasure hearing about all that Barr Brands is doing and the 80 years of legacy that you guys have had for this community. Thank you.
Thanks for letting us tell our story.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor Ann.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Talk Chamber. We are so glad you're here with us. Today, Scott and Joe shared with us all about 80 years of Barr Brands. What a huge accomplishment. They also shared with us about the 30 years of their ESOP, which is so incredible and so interesting. They had so many great stories to share and so many insights about why Barr Brands is here in Memphis and plans to stay here and grow. If you enjoyed this episode or learned a valuable piece of information, share this episode with a friend or maybe even a colleague. Subscribe to the Talk Chamber to keep up with the latest on the Chamber, economic development, and all things Memphis. Follow us on social media at Memphis Chamber, and we'll see you next time.